I'm Sylvia, 34, and I've worked my entire adult life as a financial advisor, saving every penny for my dream home. After 12 years of sacrifices and careful planning, I was finally one day away from closing on the perfect house. Then I discovered my Aunt Margaret, who raised me after my parents died, had frozen my bank account. The woman who'd always preached family comes first was sabotaging my future. What she didn't know was that her betrayal would awaken something in me I didn't know existed. Before I tell you how my own family betrayed me and how I turned the tables, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family take advantage of your trust. My life changed forever when I was 8 years old. I still remember the police officers standing in our living room, their faces solemn as they explained that my parents wouldn't be coming home. The car accident had been instant, they assured me, as if that somehow made it better. Within days, I was packing my belongings into 2 small suitcases, moving from my childhood home in Rochester to my Aunt Margaret's house in Buffalo. Aunt Margaret was my father's older sister, a stern woman with precisely styled hair who ran her household with military precision. She had one daughter, my cousin Bethany, who was 3 years older than me, and made it clear from day one that she wasn't interested in having a sister. "You'll be comfortable here," Aunt Margaret had said, showing me to the small bedroom that would be mine. "We're family, and family comes first. That's the rule in this house." At first, it seemed like Margaret truly cared. She made sure I had clean clothes, attended school regularly, and never missed a meal. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice the strings attached to her guardianship. Every act of kindness came with expectations. Every gift had conditions. "I bought you those new shoes, Sylvia," she would say when I wanted to visit a friend instead of helping Bethany with her homework. The least you could do is show some gratitude. I learned quickly that peace in the household meant compliance with Margaret's wishes, so I became quiet, obedient, and invisible whenever possible. Financial discipline wasn't just a skill I developed later in life, it was a childhood survival mechanism. When other kids were spending their allowance on candy and toys, I was tucking mine away in a small wooden box hidden beneath my mattress. Birthday money, Christmas gifts, the $5 from the tooth fairy, all of it went into my secret fund. "What are you saving for?" my friend Amanda asked once when I refused to spend my money at the mall. The truth was, I didn't know exactly. Security, maybe, independence, the freedom to one day make my own choices without Margaret's approval. College was my first taste of that freedom. I'd earned a partial scholarship to the University of Buffalo, but it wasn't enough to cover all my expenses. While other students were attending parties and enjoying campus life, I was juggling 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at the campus coffee shop, afternoon hours in the financial aid office, and weekend work as a grocery store cashier. My dorm roommate Lisa thought I was crazy. "You're missing the whole college experience," she'd complain when I turned down invitations to go out. But I graduated with honors, minimal student debt, and enough savings to put a small down payment on a used car. More importantly, I had a job lined up as a junior financial advisor at a respected firm in the city. As I became more independent, my relationship with Aunt Margaret grew increasingly strained. The more success I found, the more she seemed determined to remind me of my place in her world. "You got lucky with that job," she said when I excitedly shared news of my first promotion. "Just remember where you came from. Not everyone has family to fall back on when things get tough." My cousin Bethany had taken a different path. After barely graduating from a community college, she drifted between retail jobs, always quitting when they became too stressful, or when managers didn't appreciate her potential. Each career failure was met with Margaret's unconditional support and financial bailouts. "Bethany's artistic," Margaret would explain, as if creativity and responsibility were mutually exclusive concepts. "She just hasn't found her calling yet." Despite the dynamics at home, I continued building my life. I moved into a modest 1-bedroom apartment, drove my paid-off Honda, and brought my lunch to work every day. My colleagues teased me about my frugality, but my bank account told a different story. By 30, I had saved more than most Americans twice my age. Through it all, one dream remained constant: owning my own home. Not just any house, but a place that was truly mine, where no one could tell me how to live or threaten my security. A place where the walls didn't hold memories of feeling like an unwelcome guest. After 12 years of disciplined saving and careful investment, I finally had enough for a substantial down payment. The housing market in our area was competitive, but I was prepared. My credit score was nearly perfect. My debt-to-income ratio was ideal. I was ready. I just never imagined that my biggest obstacle would be the woman who claimed to love me like a daughter. The moment I saw the house on Maple Street, I knew it was the one. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, a two-story craftsman with blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and mature oak trees in the yard. But it had character history, and most importantly, it felt like somewhere I could finally put down roots. "It's got great bones," my realtor Julia commented as she unlocked the front door for our first showing. Original hardwood floors, lots of natural light, and the previous owners updated the kitchen 5 years ago. I walked through each room, slowly absorbing every detail. The living room had built-in bookshelves flanking a brick fireplace. The kitchen featured a breakfast nook with windows overlooking the backyard. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms, one perfect for my home office, another for guests, and a primary suite with an attached bath and walk-in closet. The backyard sealed the deal. It wasn't enormous, but it had enough space for the vegetable garden I'd always wanted to plant, a small patio for summer barbecues, and an ancient oak tree that provided dappled shade across the lawn. "What do you think?" Julia asked, though my expression had already given away my answer. "I want to make an offer," I said without hesitation. We sat at the kitchen counter drafting a competitive offer that was still within my budget. When Julia left to present it to the sellers, I stayed behind, walking through the empty rooms again, already mentally arranging my furniture, imagining my life unfolding within these walls. My phone vibrated with a text from the mortgage broker confirming my pre-approval. It was really happening. After years of sacrifice and saving, I was about to become a homeowner. The sellers accepted my offer the next day. We scheduled the closing for 3 weeks later, giving me time to arrange the final inspections and prepare for the move. That weekend, I invited Aunt Margaret and Bethany to see the house. I was nervous about sharing my achievement with them, knowing how Margaret could turn even good news into a criticism. But some part of me still craved her approval, still wanted her to be proud of what I'd accomplished. "It's in Highland Park," I explained as we pulled up to the curb. "The neighborhood is established, property values have been climbing steadily for years, and it's only a 30-minute drive from your place." Margaret stepped out of her luxury SUV, the one she'd bought after complaining for months about how unsafe her perfectly functional sedan had become, and surveyed the property with narrowed eyes. "It looks old," she commented. "Maintenance will be expensive." "It's been well maintained," I countered, trying to keep my voice light. "The inspector said the roof has at least 15 years left and the furnace was replaced 2 years ago." Bethany circled around me to get a better view. At 37, my cousin had recently moved back in with Margaret after her latest roommate situation didn't work out. "It's smaller than Mom's house," she observed, as if that were a legitimate criticism. I led them through the rooms, pointing out features I loved, explaining my plans for minor renovations and decorating. Margaret trailed behind, running her finger along surfaces as if checking for dust, asking pointed questions about the cost, the mortgage terms, and the down payment. "You're putting down 20%, she asked when I mentioned the numbers. "That's quite a lot of money, Sylvia. Where did all that come from?" "I've been saving since I started working," I reminded her. "Financial planning is literally my job." "I just worry about you tying up all your assets in a house," she said. "What if the market crashes? What if you lose your job? Family won't always be around to bail you out." You know, the irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. In all the years since my parents died, I'd never once asked Margaret for financial help. It was always Bethany who needed just a little loan until payday, or help with an unexpected expense. "I've planned for contingencies," I assured her. "I'll still have an emergency fund after closing." After they left, Julia called to confirm the final walkthrough date. "You must be getting excited," she said. "Just a week until closing." I was beyond excited. I spent the next few days measuring for curtains, researching paint colors, and browsing furniture websites. I donated items I no longer needed and carefully packed the rest, labeling boxes with their designated rooms in the new house. During the final walkthrough, I met a couple of my soon-to-be neighbors. Sarah and Michael from across the street brought over a plate of cookies and offered to help on moving day. The elderly man next door, Mr. Patterson, introduced himself and mentioned that he kept an eye on the street when people were away. "It's a good community here," he told me. "People look out for each other." For someone who had spent most of her life feeling like an outsider, even in her own family, the warm welcome meant more than they could know. The evening before closing, I treated myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant. Sitting alone at a corner table, I raised a glass of champagne in a silent toast to my parents. I wish they could see this moment, this culmination of years of hard work and determination. I hoped they would be proud of the woman their daughter had become. As I settled the bill, my phone rang. It was the seller's agent confirming our meeting time tomorrow. "Just making sure we're all set for 10 a.m., she said. "The sellers are excited to pass the keys to someone who clearly loves the house as much as they did." I went to bed that night filled with anticipation, too excited to sleep much. Tomorrow my life would change. Tomorrow I would finally have a place that was truly mine. I had no idea that Margaret had other plans. I woke before my alarm, too excited to sleep. Today was closing day. After signing the final paperwork, I would officially be a homeowner. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that made me feel confident and powerful. A navy blue suit, cream blouse, and the pearl earrings I'd bought myself after my last promotion. Over breakfast, I reviewed my closing checklist one final time. The cashier's check for the down payment and closing costs needed to be picked up from the bank on my way to the title company. I logged into my online banking to verify that everything was in order. That's when I saw it. Or rather, didn't see it. My savings account, the one containing my down payment, showed a balance of $0.00. I blinked, assuming it was a glitch or that I'd accidentally logged into the wrong account. I logged out and back in again. Same result. My checking account had its normal balance, but my savings account, the account that yesterday had contained over $85,000, was empty. Panic rose in my chest, constricting my breathing. I called the bank's customer service number with shaking hands. "I need to report unauthorized activity on my account," I said when a representative answered. "My entire savings balance is gone." "Let me look into that for you, Ms. Harrington," the representative said after verifying my identity. There was a long pause as she reviewed my account history. "I'm not showing any withdrawals or transfers from your savings account. However, I do see a temporary freeze placed on the account yesterday at 4:42 p.m. "A freeze?" I repeated, confused. "I didn't request that. Who placed the freeze?" "It appears the freeze was authorized by Margaret Harrington," she replied. "She's listed as a joint account holder and has full access privileges." The room seemed to tilt sideways as the representative's words sank in. Joint account holder, full access privileges. A memory surfaced to me at 18, sitting beside Aunt Margaret at this very same bank. I'd just received my first real paycheck from my summer job before college. "You need to open a proper account," Margaret had insisted. "Not one of those student accounts with fees and restrictions. I'll add you to mine so you get all the benefits of my premium status." I'd been so naive, so eager to please her. When the banker had slid the paperwork across the desk I'd signed without reading the fine print, not understanding that I wasn't being added to Margaret's account, she was being added to mine. "There must be some mistake," I told the representative. "Can you remove the freeze? I'm closing on a house today. I need that money." "I'm sorry, Ms. Harrington, but only the person who placed the freeze can remove it. Since this is a joint account, both holders have equal rights to restrict access." I thanked the representative and ended the call, immediately dialing Margaret's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I sent a text, "Margaret, I know you froze my account. I need you to call me immediately. I'm closing on my house today." 5 excruciating minutes passed before my phone pinged with her reply, "Family comes first. We need to talk about your priorities." Rage and disbelief warred within me as I grabbed my car keys and raced to Margaret's house. The 15-minute drive felt like hours, my mind racing through possible explanations, each more outrageous than the last. There had to be a misunderstanding. Margaret could be controlling and manipulative, but this was crossing a line I didn't think even she would cross. I pulled into her driveway and pounded on the front door, not bothering with the doorbell. Margaret opened it wearing a gardening apron, her expression calm, as if she'd been expecting me. "Sylvia, there's no need for dramatics," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. I was about to call you. You froze my account. The words came out as an accusation. My entire life savings, the money for my house. How could you do that? I did what was necessary, she replied, leading me into her immaculate living room. Sit down. We need to have a serious conversation about your future. My future. My future was supposed to include moving into my new house tomorrow. The closing is in. I checked my watch. 3 hours. The sellers are waiting. My realtor is waiting. Everyone is waiting for me to show up with a check I can't provide because you froze my account. Margaret sat down, smoothing her slacks with practiced precision. That's exactly what we need to discuss. This house purchase is impulsive and irresponsible. Impulsive? I nearly shouted the word. I've been saving for this for 12 years. I've shown you the inspection reports, the appraisal, the amortization schedule. There is nothing impulsive about this decision. It's not about the house itself, Margaret said. It's about what this move represents. You're abandoning your family when we need you most. Abandoning I'm moving 30 minutes away, not to another country. Bethany needs your help, Margaret continued as if I hadn't spoken. She's finally found her passion. She wants to open an artisanal soap boutique, but she needs startup capital. As family, you should be supporting her dreams. The pieces clicked into place, and a cold realization washed over me. You froze my account because you want me to give my house money to Bethany for a soap shop. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Bethany walked in clutching a coffee mug. Her expression was a mixture of defiance and smugness. Not give, Bethany clarified. Invest. I've already found the perfect retail space in the arts district. With your financial expertise and my creativity, we could be partners. I stared at them both, unable to comprehend the level of entitlement before me. You can't be serious. That money is mine. I earned it. I saved it. You have no right to hold it hostage. No right? Margaret's voice hardened. Who took you in when you had no one? Who put a roof over your head and food in your mouth for 10 years? Family takes care of family, Sylvia. Now it's your turn to give back. I've been giving back my entire life, I exploded. I've listened to your criticism, endured your control, swallowed my opinions to keep the peace. I've helped Bethany with job applications, resume writing interview coaching. I've done everything except hand over my life savings, and that's where I draw the line. Then you leave me no choice, Margaret said coldly. The money stays frozen until you reconsider your priorities. Family comes first, Sylvia. It's time you remembered that. I stood up, my entire body shaking with rage. This isn't about family. This is about control. You can't stand the thought of me having something that's mine, something you can't take credit for or have power over. Don't be so dramatic, Bethany scoffed. It's just a house. There will be others. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing only to deliver one final message. What you've done is financial abuse, and it's illegal. This isn't over. Margaret's voice followed me. Don't make threats you can't back up, Sylvia. The account is as much mine as it is yours. You'll never prove otherwise. I made it to my car before the tears came hot and furious. As I sat in Margaret's driveway, sobbing against my steering wheel, the full weight of the betrayal crashed down upon me. The woman who had raised me, who had claimed to love me like a daughter, had just destroyed the dream I'd worked toward for over a decade. My phone rang. Julia, my realtor, wondering where I was. I answered with a shaking voice, explaining as briefly as possible what had happened. Oh my God, Sylvia, that's terrible, she gasped. Can we postpone the closing? I don't know, I admitted. Can you call the seller's agent and explain the situation? Ask if they'd be willing to give me a few days to sort this out. I'll try, Julia promised. But I should warn you, they had several backup offers. If we can't close on schedule, they might move on to another buyer. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process my options. The bank wouldn't help me. Margaret wouldn't help me. The sellers might not wait for me. Everything I'd worked for was slipping away because of one woman's need for control. I drove home in a fog, collapsed onto my couch, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night reviewing every financial document I had, searching for any loophole, any recourse. I called the bank's 24-hour line twice more, speaking to different representatives, but receiving the same answer without Margaret's consent. The freeze would remain. As I sorted through old papers, memories surfaced of other controlling incidents throughout my childhood. Margaret deciding which activities I could participate in. Margaret screening my friends. Margaret suggesting which college major would be most practical. Margaret insisting I take the job in Buffalo rather than the better offer in Chicago, because families should stay together. The pattern was clear. I had never been a daughter to her, only a resource first as a companion for Bethany, then as a success story she could take credit for, and now as a piggy bank for her real daughter's latest whim. As dawn broke, something inside me broke too, but not in the way Margaret might have hoped. Instead of resignation, I felt a cold clarity. The shock and hurt were still there, but they were now overshadowed by determination. Margaret had underestimated me. She thought I would cave as I always had before. She was about to learn how wrong she was. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Mr. Daniels, the manager at my local bank branch. I'd called as soon as they opened, explaining that I had an emergency situation requiring immediate attention. "I understand you're in a difficult position, Ms. Harrington," Mr. Daniels said after I'd explained the situation. "Unfortunately, with joint accounts, either party has full legal rights to place restrictions. There must be something you can do," I insisted. "I can prove that every dollar in that account came from my earnings. I have tax returns, pay stubs, deposit records going back years." "That's helpful information," he acknowledged, "but it doesn't change the account structure. Have you considered legal action?" "I don't have time for a lengthy court battle. I'm supposed to be closing on a house today." Mr. Daniels considered this. "There might be one option, but it would require documentation of financial abuse. Do you have any evidence that Ms. Margaret Harrington has a pattern of controlling your finances against your will?" I thought about the college fund my parents had left that mysteriously needed to be used for household expenses, the summer job earnings that were safest in Margaret's account, the graduation money that got invested on my behalf but never materialized. "I might," I said slowly, "but gathering that evidence would take time I don't have." "I recommend consulting with an attorney immediately," Mr. Daniels advised. "In the meantime, I can help you open a new individual account and set up emergency credit options to help bridge the gap." I left the bank with a new account, a modest line of credit, and Mr. Daniels' personal recommendation for an attorney specializing in financial abuse cases. Attorney Sarah Goldstein could see me immediately recognizing the urgency of my situation. Her office was small but professional, with degrees from prestigious universities adorning the walls. "What you're describing is a clear case of financial exploitation," she said after hearing my story. "Unfortunately, it's more common than people realize, especially within families." "Can you help me get my money unfrozen?" I asked. "Today." "Not today," she admitted. "But we can begin proceedings immediately. There are legal precedents for financial independence from joint account holders in cases of exploitation. Your detailed financial records will be crucial." We spent the next hour creating a timeline of evidence, my consistent account contributions documentation of my income sources, the suspicious timing of the freeze right before my home purchase. "There's something else you should know," I told Sarah. "My parents left a small insurance policy when they died. It was supposed to be held in trust for my education, but Margaret always claimed it wasn't enough to matter. I've always wondered what happened to that money." Sarah made a note. "We'll look into that as well. Financial exploitation often has patterns stretching back years." While Sarah began drafting emergency court documents, I made another call to Margaret's younger sister, Claire. Aunt Claire lived in Philadelphia and had always been the black sheep of the family, according to Margaret. We'd only met a handful of times throughout my childhood, always during large family gatherings, where Margaret kept us carefully separated. "Sylvia, is everything okay?" Claire answered, clearly surprised by my call. "Not really," I admitted, and the whole story poured out of me. Claire's response wasn't what I expected. Rather than shock, I heard resignation in her voice. "I wish I could say I'm surprised, but Margaret's been controlling people with money her entire life. Did you know your Uncle Frank wanted to leave her years before he died? She threatened to ruin him financially if he tried." "I had no idea," I said. Uncle Frank had passed away from heart problems 5 years ago. Margaret had always portrayed their marriage as perfect. "Margaret isolated him from everyone, including me," Claire continued. She controlled every aspect of their finances. When he finally stood up to her, she manufactured a crisis with their joint accounts just like she's doing to you. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What happened? He backed down, Claire said simply. He always backed down. By the end, he was a shell of himself. After he died, I found journals where he documented years of her financial and emotional manipulation. Do you still have those journals? I asked, an idea forming. I do, Claire confirmed. I kept them in case Bethany ever needed to understand who her mother really is. Would they help you? They might, I said. They could establish a pattern of behavior. While waiting for Claire to overnight the journals, I contacted my mentor at the financial firm, Thomas Wilson. Over the years, he'd become not just a colleague, but a friend who'd guided my career with wisdom and support. This is unconscionable, Thomas said when I explained my situation. But we can work around it. The firm has an emergency assistance program for employees in crisis situations. It's not typically used for home purchases, but I'll make a case to the board. I can't ask you to do that, I protested. You're not asking. I'm offering, Thomas insisted. You're one of our most valuable advisors, Sylvia. We invest in our people. By late afternoon, I had assembled a multi-pronged solution. Thomas had secured a temporary loan against my retirement account, not ideal from a financial planning perspective, but sufficient to cover part of my down payment. Mr. Daniels had approved an emergency personal loan based on my excellent credit history and relationship with the bank, and Sarah had begun expedited legal proceedings, filing for an emergency hearing based on financial exploitation. We have a strong case for temporary injunctive relief, Sarah explained. A judge could order the freeze lifted while the larger case proceeds. How quickly could that happen? I asked. If we file today, we could potentially get an emergency hearing tomorrow morning. Do it, I said without hesitation. I called Julia with an update. I might be able to close day after tomorrow. Can you ask the sellers for a 48-hour extension? I'll try, she promised. They've been getting calls from other interested parties, but I'll explain the extraordinary circumstances. That night, I barely slept. Part of me was still reeling from the betrayal, but another part felt strangely liberated. For the first time in my life, I was standing up to Margaret not by arguing or pleading, but by taking decisive action to protect myself. The next morning, Claire's overnight package arrived containing Uncle Frank's journals. The entries painted a disturbing picture of life with Margaret. The subtle threats, the financial control, the gradual isolation from friends and family. Reading his words was like seeing my own experiences reflected back at me, only magnified by decades of marriage. Sarah called while I was still reading. We've been granted an emergency hearing at 2 p.m. today. The judge will determine whether to issue a temporary injunction that would require the bank to lift the freeze. What do you need from me? I asked. Bring all your financial records, Uncle Frank's journals, and be prepared to testify about Margaret's pattern of control. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with wood-paneled walls and uncomfortable benches. Margaret arrived with her own attorney, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. She didn't look at me as they took their seats on the opposite side of the aisle. Judge Watkins, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the case file with remarkable efficiency. I understand this is an emergency petition regarding a frozen joint account with time sensitivity due to a real estate closing. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah confirmed. My client has been subjected to financial exploitation by the joint account holder, her aunt, who has deliberately frozen assets to prevent a home purchase. Margaret's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client is a joint holder on the account with equal legal rights. She has concerns about her niece's financial decision-making and acted out of familial concern. Judge Watkins turned to me. Ms. Harrington, can you demonstrate that the funds in question originated from your earnings? Yes, Your Honor. I presented my organized documentation, tax returns, pay stubs, account statements showing direct deposits from my employer for the past 12 years. Every dollar in that account came from my earnings. And Ms. Margaret Harrington, the judge addressed my aunt directly. What specific concerns prompted you to freeze this account without notice to your niece? Margaret straightened in her seat. I was concerned about Sylvia making a hasty financial decision. The housing market is volatile. As her guardian and family elder, I felt it was my duty to protect her interests. I'm 34 years old and a certified financial advisor, I countered. I haven't been under my aunt's guardianship for 16 years. The judge nodded. And why didn't you discuss these concerns with your niece before taking such drastic action? Margaret's composure slipped slightly. There wasn't time. She was moving too quickly. Yet Ms. Harrington has provided documentation showing she's been saving for this purchase for over a decade, the judge observed. That hardly seems hasty. Sarah presented Uncle Frank's journals. Your Honor, we also have evidence of a pattern of similar financial control tactics by Ms. Margaret Harrington. These journals from her late husband document years of financial manipulation. Margaret's face drained of color as the judge reviewed selected entries. Her attorney leaned over, whispering urgently in her ear. After an hour of testimony, Judge Watkins made her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a temporary injunction requiring the immediate lifting of any freezes or restrictions on the joint account in question. Furthermore, I am ordering that no funds may be withdrawn by either party without court approval until ownership is legally determined. She looked directly at Margaret. Ms. Harrington, the court takes a very dim view of using financial leverage to control family members. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position before the full hearing. Relief washed over me as I realized what this meant. I could access my down payment money. I could still buy my house. As we left the courtroom, Margaret tried to approach me. Sylvia, you're making a terrible mistake. This isn't how family treats each other. No, Margaret, I replied calmly. This isn't how family treats each other. What you did is how people treat possessions, not loved ones. And I'm not your possession anymore. Outside, Sarah congratulated me. This is just the first step, but it's a significant one. We'll need to prepare for the full hearing to permanently separate your finances from Margaret's. One battle at a time, I said. First, I have a house to buy. The morning after the emergency hearing, I headed straight to the bank with the court order. Mr. Daniels personally oversaw the process of lifting the freeze on my account. Your funds are now fully accessible, he confirmed. Would you like me to prepare the cashier's check for your closing? Yes, please, I said, feeling a wave of relief as he processed the transaction. Watching him print the check made the victory real. I was back in control of my own money, my own future. Julia had worked miracles with the sellers, convincing them to grant a 2-day extension. They were surprisingly understanding once I explained the unusual circumstances, she told me over the phone. The closing is scheduled for 3 p.m. today. All parties are confirmed. I had just a few hours to pull everything together. I contacted the mortgage broker to ensure all the financing details were still in place, gathered my identification and closing documents, and headed home to change into the same power suit I'd laid out 2 days earlier. This time I added a small silver bracelet that had belonged to my mother, a reminder of where I came from and whose strength ran in my veins. My phone rang continuously throughout the morning. Margaret had called 11 times and left 5 voicemails, each more demanding than the last. I deleted them without listening. Bethany sent a series of texts alternating between guilt trips and insults. I blocked her number. I was reviewing my closing checklist when someone pounded on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Bethany standing in the hallway, arms crossed and face flushed with anger. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. What do you want, Bethany? You're destroying our family, she accused, pushing past me into the apartment. Mom hasn't stopped crying since you humiliated her in court. I didn't humiliate her, I replied calmly. Her own actions did that. You have no idea what you've done. Bethany paced my living room, gesturing wildly. Her blood pressure is through the roof. She could have a stroke. Would that make you happy? Of course not, I said, refusing to take the bait. But I'm not responsible for Margaret's health. Her choices are her own. She was trying to help both of us, Bethany insisted. My soap business could have supported all of us. We could have been a real family business. I looked at my cousin, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before: fear. Beneath the entitlement and anger was a woman terrified of standing on her own. You knew, didn't you? I realized suddenly. You knew she was going to freeze my account before she did it. Bethany's momentary hesitation was confirmation enough. She discussed it with me. She admitted, her voice smaller now. She said you were abandoning us and needed to be reminded where your loyalties should lie. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. And you agreed with her. You don't understand what it's like being her daughter. Bethany said, a flash of vulnerability crossing her face. Nothing I do is ever enough on my own. She's always comparing me to you, perfect Sylvia, with her perfect job and perfect savings. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Bethany had been shaped by the same controlling force that had tried to shape me. But where I had resisted, she had conformed. I'm sorry that's been your experience, I said honestly, but it doesn't justify what you both tried to do to me. Bethany's vulnerability vanished as quickly as it had appeared. So that's it. You're choosing a house over your family. I'm choosing myself, I corrected her. For the first time in my life, I'm putting my needs first. Maybe someday you'll find the courage to do the same. You'll regret this, she warned as she stormed toward the door. When you're all alone in that big house with no one who cares about you, you'll wish you'd listened. After she left, I sat down to steady my nerves. The confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Was I making a mistake? Would I end up alone? Then I remembered Uncle Frank's journals, the heartbreaking entries of a man who had surrendered his independence to keep the peace, who had compromised until there was nothing left of himself. That would not be my fate. I arrived at the title company 30 minutes early, clutching my document portfolio and cashier's check. Julia was already there, her smile reassuring. Everything's in order, she assured me. The sellers are on their way. This is happening, Sylvia. The closing process itself was surprisingly anticlimactic, just an hour of signing documents, initialing pages, and reviewing final numbers. But when the seller handed me the keys, the significance of the moment hit me full force. Congratulations, she said warmly. I hope you'll be as happy there as we were. I drove straight to my new house, my house after the closing. Standing on the front porch, I inserted the key into the lock with trembling fingers. The door swung open to empty rooms filled with possibility. I walked through each space, slowly touching walls, opening closets, standing in patches of sunlight, streaming through the windows. For the first time since my parents died, I felt truly at home. My phone rang, Sarah calling with an update. The judge has scheduled the full hearing for next month. Until then, the temporary order remains in effect. Margaret cannot access or restrict your funds. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. There's more, she continued. I've been researching your parents' insurance policy. Preliminary findings suggest there was indeed a policy worth approximately $50,000 intended for your education. We're still tracking where those funds went. The information should have angered me, but instead I felt oddly detached. Margaret's theft no longer had power over me. Keep investigating, I told Sarah. But honestly, it doesn't change anything. I've already won the battle that matters. The next day was moving day. Friends from work arrived with coffee and donuts ready to help transport my belongings from the apartment to the house. Thomas came with his pickup truck. Julia stopped by with a houseplant as a warming gift. We were unloading the first round of boxes when Margaret's SUV pulled up to the curb. She got out alone, looking smaller, somehow less intimidating than she once had. My friends tensed, forming a protective semicircle around me. Do you want us to ask her to leave? Thomas offered quietly. No, I said. I've got this. I walked down the driveway to meet her, stopping at a distance that felt safe but not fearful. What are you doing here, Margaret? She smoothed her hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. I came to talk sense into you. This has gone far enough, Sylvia. That court order is temporary. We're family. We should be able to resolve our differences without lawyers. You're right about one thing, I agreed. Family shouldn't need lawyers, but you crossed that line, not me. I was trying to protect you. She insisted, the same justification she'd used for every controlling act throughout my life. No, you were trying to control me, I corrected her. There's a difference. After everything I've done for you, I cut her off. I'm grateful you took me in when my parents died, but that doesn't give you the right to control my life or steal my money. Steal? Her voice rose indignantly. It was a joint account you insisted on when I was 18 and didn't know any better, I reminded her. A joint account where every dollar came from my earnings. And what about my parents' insurance money? The policy that was supposed to pay for my education? Margaret's face paled. Who told you about that, Claire? She's always been jealous of our relationship. It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that you took advantage of a grieving child and stole her inheritance. I did what I had to do, Margaret said, her voice hardening. Someone had to be the adult and make difficult decisions. And now I'm the adult, I said firmly. And I've decided this relationship is too toxic to continue. Please leave. You ungrateful. She stopped herself, visibly struggling for control. This isn't over. The court might have given you a temporary win, but I'll fight this all the way. You'll spend so much on legal fees, you'll wish you'd never bought this house. I looked at the woman who had raised me, feeling not anger, but pity. You know what the saddest part is, Margaret? You could have shared in my happiness. You could have been proud of what I've accomplished. Instead, you tried to tear it down because you couldn't take credit for it. I'm going to win, she threatened. I always do. I smiled, not with joy, but with certainty. Not this time. As she drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The legal battle ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer fighting just for my money. I was fighting for my freedom. The court date arrived faster than expected. Margaret appeared with a new, even more expensive attorney. They presented an argument that the joint account had been established for family purposes, and that Margaret had made significant contributions over the years. Sarah methodically dismantled their claims, presenting my detailed financial records alongside Uncle Frank's journals and new evidence about my parents' misappropriated insurance policy. The judge's ruling was decisive. The account would be separated with all funds returned to me, and Margaret would be required to repay the insurance money with interest. Margaret's face was a mask of fury as the verdict was read. She refused to look at me as she swept out of the courtroom, her attorney trailing behind. Congratulations, Sarah said as we gathered our documents. This is a complete victory. It was a victory, but one that came with complicated emotions. I had stood up for myself and won, but I had also lost the only family I'd known for most of my life. The justice felt right, but incomplete. 6 months after moving into my house on Maple Street, I was finally beginning to feel settled. The living room walls were painted a warm sage green. The backyard vegetable garden had yielded its first harvest. The oak tree had dropped its leaves, creating a golden carpet across the lawn. The legal battle with Margaret had concluded, with her paying a substantial settlement for the misappropriated insurance funds. She had made no attempt to contact me since the final court date, and I had made my peace with that silence. What surprised me was how quickly I had built connections outside of Margaret's shadow. My neighbors Sarah and Michael had become genuine friends, inviting me for weekly dinner gatherings that reminded me how family could feel if built on mutual respect rather than obligation. At work, I had been promoted to senior financial advisor with Thomas, encouraging me to develop a specialization in helping clients navigate complex family financial situations. You have unique insight, he'd observed. You've lived it. That perspective is valuable. Inspired by my own experience, I established a free financial literacy program for young adults aging out of foster care. Once a month, I taught workshops on banking basics, credit management, and long-term savings strategies to young people who, like me, had navigated loss and displacement. You need to understand that a joint account means shared ownership, I explained during one session. Always read the fine print, and remember that financial independence is a crucial part of adult autonomy. The students connected with my story in ways I hadn't anticipated. Many had experienced their own versions of financial control or exploitation by the very people who should have protected them. How do you not stay angry all the time? One young woman asked after class. My aunt took my Social Security survivor benefits for years. I don't know if I can ever forgive that. Forgiveness isn't an obligation, I told her honestly. But I found that building my own security was more healing than holding on to anger. The best revenge wasn't exposing my aunt. It was creating a life she couldn't touch. My relationship with my extended family had also evolved in unexpected ways. Aunt Claire and I spoke regularly, now rebuilding a connection that Margaret had deliberately severed years ago. Through Claire, I met cousins, second cousins, and family friends who had been kept at arm's length during Margaret's reign. Your father would be so proud of you, Claire told me during her first visit to my house. He was always the independent one, too. Margaret could never control him the way she controlled Frank. The most surprising development came 3 months after the court case concluded. A letter arrived with no return address, written in a familiar hand. Inside was a 5-page confession from Bethany. "I've moved out of Mom's house," she wrote. "After seeing what happened with you, I finally recognized the same patterns in my own life. I've never been allowed to succeed or fail on my own terms. Everything was always part of her plan for my life, not mine." Bethany had found an apartment in a neighboring city and a job at a local art supply store. "It's not glamorous," she admitted, "but it's mine. I'm taking one community college class at a time, paying my own way. For the first time, I'm living without someone else controlling every decision." She ended with an apology that seemed genuinely heartfelt. "I was wrong to participate in what Mom did to you. I was jealous of your independence for so long that I never recognized it was exactly what I needed for myself. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that your stand against her helped me find my own courage." I didn't rush to reconnect with Bethany. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too broken. But I did send a brief response acknowledging her apology and wishing her well in her new independence. It was a small opening a possibility for something different in the future. As spring approached, I stood on my front porch watching the first crocuses push through the soil in my flower beds. The house had transformed from a symbol of financial achievement into something far more meaningful. A sanctuary where I made my own rules, a place where my worth wasn't determined by someone else's approval. The phrase "family comes first" had been weaponized against me throughout my life, twisted to mean that my needs, dreams, and boundaries should always come second to others' demands. Now I understood its true meaning. Family, real family, whether by blood or by choice, uplifts rather than diminishes. It supports rather than controls. It celebrates independence rather than punishing it. I had lost the family of my childhood, but in standing up for myself, I had gained something more valuable: the freedom to build a family of my own choosing, connected by respect and mutual support, rather than obligation and control. The money Margaret had tried to take from me had purchased more than just a house. It had bought my liberation from a lifetime of emotional manipulation. In trying to freeze my future, she had inadvertently set me free. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was controlling your life? What gave you the strength to break free? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own.